Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As many of you have joined our program over the years, you realize that deeply we love going into the natural healing arts to find other alternatives for people to face today's challenges. Certainly one of the biggest ones that we've actually faced and that we've shared with the listeners of the program over the years has been that of cancer. It's amazing to think that this is a multi-million-dollar industry that's driven by people who go on walks, who go on runs, and do a various array of things that they can do to raise money not only to do cancer research, but to create better awareness about what it is and how it can actually be prevented in the first place. The funny thing is, though, with all these millions of dollars that have been raised over the last 30, 40, and 50 years, we're still no further along to a cure for cancer than we were 50 years ago. But interestingly enough, I know that you listeners out there have realized that we have many times also said, well, look, cancer was cured back in the 1920s, so what's all the hubbub about? Sometimes people are caught off guard, scratching their head like, really? Well, when did they do that? Well, back in the 1920s with Otto Warburg's research. Well, this day and age, people are starting to become more and more educated over the Internet and starting to take their lives into their own hands. And certainly that's what our guest today did. In fact, I'm going to just go ahead and read you the title of her book. And this is very blatant, and I think you should listen to this. Ha! I laugh in the face of cancer. That's a pretty bold statement because people who may have cancer, have been diagnosed possibly with cancer, certainly aren't feeling that. But let's find out what this story is and why someone can so boldly proclaim that they laugh in the face of cancer. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today the author, Susan Liberty Hall. Susan, how are you today?
Good, Daniel. Thank you so much, and I just loved listening to you. It was like you and I think the same thoughts, and I appreciate you so much.
Well, you know, it's really enjoyable to be able to do a show like this, to be able to get out there and bring people on the program to talk about this, and we really have good, balanced conversations. I never intend to go after the evil pharmaceutical industry or the Food and Drug Administration or the American Medical Association. You know, those are associations and they do what they do. But I figure, you know, if we can lead people in a different direction, if we can find answers or help them to learn, do some of this research for yourself, you could really, you know, make a whole world of difference. Then, you know, that's what our goal is. Let's just forget about calling the bad guys and go after the good guys, I guess. And that's pretty much what your book is about.
Yes, it truly is. That's right.
Now, tell us how this all started for you.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay. Well, I'll be 69 on May 28th, so I was diagnosed with cancer in April of 2012, and at the same time, my beloved brother, the late owner of the Los Angeles Lakers basketball team, Jerry Buss, was also diagnosed with cancer. It was interesting because it occurred at the same exact time. He called to tell me that he had cancer. At that time, I had 2 very hard lumps like marbles on my right breast. And since I have been involved in healthy living for the last 20 years with my business, which is Young Living Essential Oils, therapeutic grade oils, and the teachings of D. Gary Young, I was surprised. I didn't understand what? Because I'm doing everything right. How come I have cancer? But with the biopsy, it was confirmed I had 2 lumps that were cancerous and 1 that was benign. So at this time, my brother decided, because he is, you know, a conventional person, and he's brilliant, he has had a great deal of money, and he was determined to get, as he said, the best that money could buy. And he spent well over $1 million proving that point. He was in the hospital the last 9 months of his life, and I'm sorry that I have to say he had a very difficult time with his conventional choice. He did surgery, and he also did heavy doses of chemo and radiation. It was like more was better because he was rich and famous. So he got hit pretty hard. The first surgery they did, they made a mistake, and they punctured a hole in him. The next 9 surgeries were spent trying to correct the error. 5 surgeries, 4 procedures later, that original error was never corrected. So if I can back up a little bit, I'd like to tell your listeners, because, by the way, each of you, you're so precious to me, just got to tell you right up front that if any of you have cancer or know someone who has cancer, you've got somebody on your team right now. That's me and Robert Roy of Two Feathers Healing Formula, because I do not have cancer anymore, and I used his formula, and I was able to overcome cancer in a very short period of time. It is so hopeful for all of you out there. I'm on your team. We'll talk more about that later, but I want to get into my story so you can understand. This is very real, very profound, and very simple. So when he decided to do that, I knew that I could not do that. Our mother had died at the age of 62, but not until she had suffered horribly with chemotherapy and surgery and all of those things, and she had cancer. She died when she was 62, and she died a most horrible death. And I mean, the last year of her life was hell. In the end, she begged me to let her go. And of course, that was the right thing, certainly. Mm-hmm. But she didn't want to be here anymore. It was that bad. So the basic thing that I want to say to you is that I couldn't do that. Again, I couldn't. So when this happened to Jerry, I didn't know what I was going to do. There's several clinics. I've heard about clinics. I know there's one in Ecuador that uses Young Living essential oils, and I wanted to go to that clinic. And if I had $20,000, I would have gone to that clinic, but I didn't have it. And I didn't ask my beloved brother for it, although he would have given it to me, but I didn't, because he made it clear that he didn't think my life could be saved by anything other than doing what he was doing, and he begged me to have the mastectomy and the radiation and chemo, which I couldn't do.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you think about just a process like that, it's just, you can't imagine how you can come out of that good. I just, think of it. Surgery, then we're going to do chemotherapy and radiation. You just think about being put under a death ray or something like that. So
yeah, and since when does poison ever create healing? I don't know. I don't get it, but that's just me. So I had to tell him, Daniel, no, I couldn't do that. And just as he was so worried about my choices, believe me when I tell you that I was so worried about his, because I knew the outcome. It didn't take a rocket scientist to know the outcome. I'd been around that block before. So I went home, and I thought, what am I going to do? So I sat down, and in a very profound moment, I did my prayer to our God, and I asked what my God would have me do to save my own life, because I didn't have any answers. Mm-hmm. So in that moment, I stood up, I walked over to my file cabinet in my office, and I opened up a file under C, and there was a cancer file that I had put there 15 or 20 years before. I had forgotten all about it, but the memories came back when I saw it, and I opened it up, and there I saw Robert Roy and the Two Feathers Healing Formula, which is an American Indian medicine man, medicine woman healing remedies that was passed down from generation to generation. It's very pure. It's natural, all natural and herbs, and it's very inexpensive. So I was immediately very suspect. How can that be? How can that be? So I had to remember that this was the answer to my prayer, and I had to be obedient, and I was. Mm-hmm. So I looked at the information. It showed a picture of a man, an older man like my own age, who had like what appeared a hole in his chest or a scar, and next to him there was a table, and on that table there were 8 tumors, so-called tumors, that he claimed had been taken out of his body using the Two Feathers Healing Formula.
Ooh.
Yes.
That many, huh?
8. Well, wow. Of course, I had 18 out of my
18,
breast, so I would know
goodness.
all about it. Yeah.
So now when you say they were taken out of his body, what do you mean specifically by that?
Well, of course, I wouldn't have known in that moment what either. So what I did was I called the phone number that was still on that paper, and I'm grateful, that he still answered, but I guess God wouldn't have given me a phone number that was disconnected. So, but that was an answer to my prayer. So I called Robert Roy. We talked about it, and he told me what that was, and I will tell your listeners what that was. But I would like to use my own example with my own healings, since it was mine. I feel confident to tell your listeners about it. So I ordered a jar of the Two Feathers Healing Formula. One jar was $135, The next time I ordered 6 jars, and I got 6 jars for $645 because I needed to save money. And so I began using the protocol immediately, listening very careful to Mr. Robert Roy, realizing that neither he nor I can prescribe. We can't do that. We mustn't do that, and we do not do that. So I'm just going to tell you what happened to me. So I remember I had 2 malignant tumors on my breast. They were hard like marbles. There was a third one in there somewhere that I couldn't feel or see. So I began taking the formula. I took 2 capsules. This would be vegetable capsules, taking the formula and putting it into the capsules and internally taking it 2 times a day. Now, it did make me sick. I had a healing crisis, or you might say during a detox. People who are familiar with detoxing understand that when something's in the body that needs to come out, then chances are you're not going to feel very good at first. So I didn't feel very good at first. I felt nauseous, but I used my Young Living therapeutic grade essential oil of peppermint to help me with that. And I'm very familiar with it because that oil had healed me of a very horrible migraine headache situation that I had had all of my life. And as soon as I got that peppermint oil, that was no longer in my life. So I knew what to do, but I didn't feel very good. And I just realized, okay, I'm going to have to get through this. It's a whole lot better than a mastectomy. Mm-hmm. So I took those 2 tablets for 14 days. And I was able to work. In fact, I went over to see Jerry. I drove from Phoenix to L.A. and, went to be with him. And he had his surgery, and it was real bad. It was very bad. And I was there at his home and helping him, loving him. So during that time, on the 14th day, I was surprised to wake up and find that one of the 2 tumors was gone. By that, I mean, I don't know what happened to it. I don't know where it went. It was gone, and I was very encouraged. And 3 days later, the second one was gone. It disappeared. So they both were gone. They're in there somewhere, but I can't see them and I can't feel them. So already I have an evidence after 14 days that something amazing has happened. So I called Robert Roy, and he explained that it's possible now that the cancer is dead, no longer attached to my living tissue, and this would be the time, he said, to put a little bit of that formula now on top of the tumor site where the tumors had been. So I took a little bit of it, and I followed his advice, and I put it on the tumor site. Within 3 days, it opened up a wound. It opened up a wound in my body, and there I could see the tumor. Mm-hmm. I could see it. It's a fungus. It looks like a fungus. It is a fungus. It was big. It was horrible, and it was painful also. But I could see it, and I knew that the next step would be to pull it out. By that, I mean this 2 Feathers Healing Formula. It pulls it out somehow. It is an amazing thing. I can't explain it. I don't understand it, but the body does, and that's all that mattered. And I was in faith because this was, after all, the answer to the prayer. So during that process, it took another 14 days, 2 weeks exactly, for that tumor to fall out on its own, by itself. I put it in a specimen jar. It was the size of a $1 pancake. Perhaps it's spongy like that, gray-white color, and the depth was, imagine this now, I put 10 quarters, one on top of the other, to measure the depth, because I didn't know how to do that. I didn't have, instruments to measure this thing. Heck, I'm a 68-year-old grandmother. Heck, mm-hmm. I didn't know what to do with it, but I preserved it because I already understood that I would have to write a book about this. This had to be shared.
Mm-hmm. It's really fascinating to realize that one of the things you did is you took responsibility for your health, and you went out to find answers other than what's commonly available out there. Now, a lot of times people will take a look and say, well, there's the standard protocol of trying to reverse cancer, put it into remission, and a lot of people aren't real happy about how this, protocol has continued to stay the way that it has, and they question, why is this possible? Well, the fact is there are state laws that regulate how doctors are supposed to treat patients. Now, specifically, when we think about that way of looking at it, people can see why lawsuits, especially in the United States, are so prevalent when it comes to medical care, because it's easy for a person to go in to, let's say, get their cancer treated by this standard protocol that they have. They don't get treated to the point where they're satisfied. And the next thing you know, they're trying to find a way to sue this doctor for doing the job that he was supposed to do. And, the reality is there's that law that's in place that makes people become treated the way they're supposed to, through the doctors, whatever the case is. And you realize you've got to take a step outside of that and maybe not perhaps go see a doctor, but find other ways to approach this if you're not satisfied with the outcome, which my understanding is from traditional cancer treatment protocols that your rate of success is about 1 to 2%. Those aren't very good odds.
Well, I agree with you, absolutely. Here's what I found. This is the experience that I had, because as soon as I started to write this book, it would seem to me that God sent me many things, like information that would be helpful for the book, people and their stories. And people would come to me, and I would say, this is what I did, and I'm cancer-free. And they'd say, well, I can't do that. My insurance doesn't cover that. Or I can't do that. My family would think I'm crazy. And, that was the attitude for most people. A few people did come to me and said, well, that's really strange. I don't want tumors coming out of my body. I'm going to go instead to the naturopathic clinics. I'm going to go. I had one lady, she went to Europe and spent $40,000, $50,000. Well, at the same time I started Two Feathers, she chose to go there, called me 2 months later. She was on her way back being air-vac'd back to Houston and had to have an immediate surgery for bleeding. And she called me and she said, if I survive this operation, I'm going to go on Two Feathers. So she came back and told me that her tumors were worse than they ever were, bigger than they had been when she started. And I was shocked, but I was learning. So I got her at long last and in the late stages of her cancer onto the Two Feathers. She was doing well. I was shocked. I was amazed and thrilled. Then she decided to go back to a naturopathic doctor, and he immediately said, oh, no, don't take that. Get off of that. That's not going to help you at all. She got off of it and later died. She died,
oh,
Daniel.
No.
She died. Mm-hmm. I went to another naturopathic doctor here in Scottsdale, and I told him what I was doing with the Two Feathers formula. He said, oh, I know all about it. He said, my brother was healed. And he said, and this is a famous doctor, by the way, and he said, I have the tumor. He whipped out of his office drawer the tumor that his brother had removed by the Two Feathers healing formula from between his eyes, which was a cancerous tumor, skin cancer, and he was healed. And I said, well, that's wonderful. And I said, would you give me a testimonial? I'd like to come here and show you these tumors. And I showed him the breast. He took photographs, and I need a testimonial for my book. He says, yeah. I said, I'd be happy to help. Well, so we did that. But, at the end of everything, when I went back and asked him for that testimonial, he said, I've been thinking about that, and I just can't do that. He said, I'm worried. I'd be scared. He said, I know another person, another doctor, who recommended this Two Feathers formula, and his client or his patient was healed, but he got sued by or taken by the medical board and almost lost his license. And he said,
wow.
And he would not do it. That same man had a cancer clinic, this doctor, very famous doctor right here in Scottsdale, and I saw his patients, and I said, my God, they're dying. He said, I know. I said, well, you got to tell them about Two Feathers. He said, I can't. Mm-hmm. I can't. And so there you have it. I mean, people are afraid. There's fear, horrid fear. That's why I want to laugh. Ha! We have to stand up. Daniel, you're so right. And so, someone has to have enough courage, Daniel, to look at the evidence and say, you know what, I don't like those odds. 1 to 2%, I don't think so. All the hell and misery, not for me. And then what we have to do is find something that works, because all of this last 2 years, I have met many people who went to the naturopathic clinics. They went all over the world. Every one of them is dead. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe there are some clinics that heal people that I don't know about. I'm sure that there are. But these were the people that God sent to me, and they are no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to say that, but I just have to tell you. So I want to tell your listeners a little bit more then that during the next few months, I had 18 tumors come out one at a time. And if that's the truth, and it is the truth, then how come Mayo Clinic and the Desert Radiology here, each of them independently found there were only 3 tumors in my body? Mm-hmm. They did everything, every test. So I have to say that this medicine is so powerful that the only explanation is that these tumors simply must travel from wherever they are to come out that site that had been designated and be removed. Now, there's hundreds of testimonials. I am certainly not the only one. Robert Roy has helped over 60,000 people over the last 34 years. He has been available for me day and night, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I've never seen such devotion. He never gets 1 penny for that. So basically, I was able to overcome cancer. It was so inexpensive. It was so simple. It was so effective that people won't believe to me. They just won't believe me that it's so simple. And remember, this was done without a doctor.
Mm-hmm. You know, and the challenging thing, though, and it's understanding why people think and do what they do, is that it's just, as you said earlier, it's fear. They don't know another way, and because a doctor is a trained, educated professional, they must know something that we don't know.
Yeah.
So you sort of surrender that into their hands. But then the funny thing about that thinking is this, and that is, but aren't you interested in the result, the end result? Isn't that what we should be concerned with? And I say this because some time ago we had Suzanne Summers on the program, and she has a book called Breakout, which is just about that very thing, about how to reverse cancer and prevent from getting it in the first place.
Yes,
and she herself, you know, is one of those that not only survived but thrived, and she's cancer-free as well. And so she puts together this book using the power of her celebrity, which is pretty powerful, to go to these mavericks, as they're considered, that are coming after this whole thing in a different way, you know, that are getting really interesting results and very positive results as well. And she was telling me an interesting story about how she was on Larry King, and she brought on 2 of the medical professionals that she featured in her book. I believe there was 4 of them. And they decided, the network, to bring in 2 medical professionals to, I guess, according to her, refute the testimony of these 2 people that she brought on. And, you know, finally in the middle of all of this, she finally sort of like put her hand down on the table and said, you know, look, you guys are here and you're spouting off all of this, at times, nonsense. And she says, look at all the millions, even maybe a few $billion that have been raised.
Yes.
Okay, for this cure of cancer and cancer research. And you guys are no further along 50 years later than you were 50 years ago. And I said, you know, one of the funniest things about this that I said to her was, it never even occurred to these 2 guys to take a look and say, aren't we concerned with the effect? You know, what is the outcome? If these guys are getting success, shouldn't we be looking at that rather than trying to argue against it?
That's right, Daniel. And may I say that that's the same exact thing. The extreme prejudice that I got from all medical doctors, facilities, etc., was astounding. No one, except for my Dr. Olstein, who is the only one to have the courage, and he is a very well-known homeopathist, very respected. He is the only one in the medical community that walked through the process with me, took the photos, saw the tumors, understood everything I was doing, and signed his name to the bottom line when I was cancer-free by using an AMAS blood test, because remember, PET scans cause cancer. Even Mayo Clinic will not use PET scans. I went there, my brother Jerry insisted, and we had the top surgeon, you know, because Jerry arranged it, so I had them all, the best ones, the biggest ones, they were there, and they said, well, I told them what I was doing because, you know, Jerry insisted I have these tests. They did the ultrasound, they did the mammogram, but they said, we will not do PET scans because we know that causes cancer 300 times more radiation than a mammogram. They won't use it. And yet, they were giving them out to my dear brother like pancakes on a Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what happened. I went to my regular doctor that I went to using Medicare before I got the cancer, and then when I did, he told me not to ever come back, and he was very upset with me. He said, until you have a mastectomy, you're not welcome back to my office. So I had to walk out from that. Today, if I do need to go to a doctor, I cannot tell them I have had cancer. I have to hide it, or they won't accept me as their patient.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Then I went to the Mayo Clinic.
So much for Obama's Obamacare and pre-existing conditions, huh?
Well, heavens, not when it comes to now. Yeah, I mean, if I did, I was told very simply, after you have a mastectomy, you're welcome back.
Mm-hmm.
So then when at the Desert Radiology here, that radiologist, he took it a step further, and he pointed his finger at me. He had a red face. He yelled at me, and he said, you are dying of cancer. Get out of here. Never come back. Then he stuck his hand out as if I'm going to shake that hand, and I pushed his hand away, and I said, no, thank you, Dr. God, because you're not my God. Mm-hmm. I walked out, and I filed a complaint with him with the medical board. I got a return reply saying, and I quote, he was perfectly within his rights to say and do what he did. Case closed.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, so this is what we're up against. The medical facilities and the doctors, they have no interest, and those who do are scared to say something. And so here's what we're left with. Here's the good news. We can do this without doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a lot of pressure. Most people that have come to me have said, well, my mother and my father, they want me to do the mastectomy, the radiation, and this, that, and the other. And they do. They do it.
And here's the thing, your mother and father don't have to live with that decision. You do.
See, that's what I learned about this. This is we have to stop giving away that power. You mentioned it earlier. That's an important point in my book. We have to be willing to take responsibility because, you know what? Guess what? I'm not dying of cancer. Mm-hmm. I am so well and so vibrant and grateful, but I want to share everything with my success of reality and victory with your listeners. And I have a website, and if anyone wants to reach me, they can, because my email is there, and I will be very happy to speak with anyone who wants to talk to me about my experience.
Mm-hmm. Now, I do have a question that was posted here as part of the e-chat, and that is, they were kind of trying to get an idea, what would actually be in this formula?
Well,
not that you have to give the detailed specifics, but generally speaking.
There's 17 minerals and herbs, and a lot of people have asked that question, and because this is a family recipe, so to speak, they won't tell you exactly what's in it. But I do know from speaking with Robert Roy that there are 17 herbs, but this medicine man that received the information, and this is my understanding of it, must have received this from on high because he was given like an understanding of how to blend these materials. It was quite complex, these 17 minerals and herbal remedies, into one thing that made it different from anything else there is in the world. And I understand that a little bit because Gary Young does that with his blends. He's very, very famous in essential oils because of his blends. And they are given to him through angelic insight and the schematics and the formula and how to do it. So I understand a little bit about that. So we won't be able to give out what's in it, but I would say this. For those people who are more concerned about the results, not that I would take anything that wasn't pure, of course, certainly not ever, but it's the result that mattered to me, and that's what I got.
And it's also interesting to note you're seeing more and more, I guess, you want to call them beyond pioneers and mavericks, but people who are really standing their ground in this area. And it's still, again, it amazes me how, and this is just my statement and my opinion, how this I'm trying to think of the right thing to say, well, raising money for the fight against cancer or the cure for cancer research, to me, has become more of a fad of fashion. Now people are running around with bracelets, but yet people are still dying. Where is all this money going? And that was something that Suzanne also said. She says, I never get involved with any of those things because the bottom line is people really don't know what that money is going to be used for. And I kind of wonder myself, as much has been raised, you could have done that bailout we had in 2008.
Well,
saved a lot of people, actually. But
and that's true. And as you know, cancer now, they say the statistics are 1 in 3 people.
Right.
And so, you know, with that happening, and so many baby boomers and people my age, and getting cancer, we're going to bankrupt the system as it is, because every cancer case, the huge sum of money. Now, I wouldn't mind spending any amount of money if the result was, you know, victory and being well. Mm-hmm. But that's not what happens. So it's almost like the system, it just can't improve. I don't see how it can reverse direction, so I'm not going with it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going with it. You know, I'm going to place my faith in what works, and this is what works for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm just so thrilled and so happy that I have a chance, especially now with Mother's Day coming on Sunday here, mm-hmm. that we can share this with all the mothers, you know, I mean, and the fathers, because we just have to do something for our people. I mean, it's not just that you die of cancer; it's that you die horribly of mm-hmm. cancer mm-hmm. when you do those things. So I'm so lucky today that I have many people come to me who have all different situations. Some of them have come with chemo and mastectomies and this and that and the other, and they are still alive today using the Two Feathers formula. It's mm-hmm. true. It's much harder to get them well, mm-hmm. but they're still doing it.
Now, here's something I'd like to ask you, because we really haven't touched on this yet, and that is, what specifically is cancer?
Yeah, what is cancer? You know, all of us have some, of course, now let's keep this in mind. I have no understanding of medical things at all. I have no training. So from a layman's point of view, it seems to me that our bodies are having a hard time with our immune systems. And, you know, it's pretty easy, even for someone who isn't educated with medical things. I think it's more common sense that, yeah, we are challenged because of all of the chemicals and the poisons, and not just that, not just the toxins, but the stress of life. The stress of life and trying to be healthy in this society, in this world, is not easy. So I know one thing, that everybody has a little bit of cancer, but it gets out of hand when the immune system isn't working and the body can't fight off those cancer cells. Mm. Now, here's something interesting, Daniel. I use the AMAS blood test, and all of this is chronicled in my book. The reason I wrote the book is I wanted it to be a manual, a simple, easy manual that someone could duplicate so that they would have the same success, hopefully, prayerfully, that I have had. Now, as long as they stick to the program, there's a really, that's the issue. I've seen so many people get started, say, oh, you know, I'm not sure, I don't know, I think I'll quit now, and you know, wishy-washy is not going to do it. Mm-hmm. You got to be committed to the program. So that's why I wrote the book, and I tell everything about it, including the Young Living protocol that I used to help my body with my immune system, along with the Two Feathers healing formula. And then there was exercise, and then there was positive thinking. There's many aspects to us being well, and I don't think any one of them will be addressed by going to the doctors. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-mm.
Now, you just used what I think is a very key word, and that is commitment. Now, when you take a look at the history of indigenous cultures, and you look at how they had a shaman, witch doctor, whatever you want to call these people that were within the tribe to do the healing of somebody who fell sick, there was a commitment on the part of the individual to be healed. There was a commitment by the community that surrounds this individual to make sure that this person is healed. And this day and age, it seems, with technology, that we've kind of kept one foot in our house and the other foot in the doctor's office.
Yes.
You know, with the attitude, well, do the best you can, but I'm going to be over here just in case. You know, it's like we want these guarantees, whereas what I'm suggesting from indigenous cultures is you had to guarantee yourself 100% you would be healed. You had to believe this. Yes. And that was the real power behind it, was getting you to believe that it not only was possible, but it's very real and very doable.
Yeah.
Where today we're faced with such uncertainty. I mean, look at the silliest things we look for guarantees in. And this is a big thing we're talking about here.
I know. Well, that's exactly why
That's why I say I don't like to point my fingers and say those bad doctors. It really starts with the individual, and the choices you make based on how you go about researching the choices that you make. And that's a lot of what you talk about in your book as well.
Yes, and the other thing that's very important is we have to have a ways and a means of knowing that the treatment you've chosen is working, and that's what I have and been given with Robert Roy and the Two Feathers Healing Formula. He taught me about the AMAS blood test, which is a simple blood test, and in that blood test it determines how much cancer you have. From 0 to 700, anything over 134 is elevated and considered cancer. Anything under 134 is considered not cancer. So when I first started, I was way up there, and within a few months I was down underneath the 134, cancer-free, and I continue to do the AMAS blood test every 3 months because, see, it's important. Once someone has cancer, as Dr. Gary Young taught me, then your body knows how to create it. So unless you have undone those conditions that brought it on in the first place, it could come back. That's just a reality. So what we do is we suggest then that every 3 months you have this test, watch for it, and so, or in my case now, once every year or once every 6 months. The last test I had was, Daniel, it was 0. They had never had anybody like that, so the doctor that created the AMAS blood test at the oncology lab called my doctor and said, who is this Susan Hall that has 0 in her blood test, 0 cancer? And what did she do? So I sent him a book thinking, wow, that's great. But I never heard back from him.
Oh, boy.
But the point is, it's 0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. There you go, the result.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing, too. You bring up this AMAS test, okay? What typically are the standard tests, and I'm sure that you went through this, that people who are trying to diagnose whether they have cancer or not usually take?
Well, mostly, of course, they do the ultrasound, they do the mammograms, and they do the biopsy. In my opinion, the biopsy spreads the cancer and was never, ever necessary. Even though I had it, I was scared.
Okay. Let me ask you this real quick then,
Sure.
Susan, because I've heard the word biopsy. I've never looked it up to see what it means. What happens in the biopsy testing process?
Well, they insert a needle into the area, and they test it, and then they can tell you if it's cancerous. However, when they do that, they spread the cancer. Now, can I prove that? I can't prove that, but I've heard that from Dr. Gary Young, my mentor. I've heard that from Robert Roy, and I've heard that from several people, including a personal friend of mine who had a biopsy, and shortly thereafter, within days, her body ballooned up, and the cancer went into her bones.
Ooh.
Yes, and that person had done the mastectomy. She had done the chemo. She had done the radiation. She was a little tiny girl of 96 pounds, and she came to me because they sent her home to die. Mm-hmm. And so I got her on the Two Feathers formula, but she was still doing that dance of, looking to Dr. God because she really couldn't believe that this simple thing was going to save her life. She still believed, well, maybe Dr. God could still help her. But, she was supposed to die in November. She is still alive today. She was doing fabulously well, but I'm sorry to say that she decided to go back to her oncologist just to see how Two Feathers was doing after she'd been doing well all these months since November. She went back to him, and he said, well, I'm very sorry to tell you this, but you have new cancer in your stomach. So, and we're going to have to go in and surgery and take it out. So she called me up, and she was very upset. She said, well, if the Two Feathers is working, why do I have the tumors? And I thought about that, and I thought, I can't answer that. I can't believe that you do have them. Robert Roy said he couldn't believe that she had them. We both didn't believe it is possible after being on the Two Feathers formula for 5 months. Nevertheless, she decided to have the operation. She went in to have the operation. The doctor discovered with the surgery, sorry, there are no new tumors there. Made a mistake, although he didn't admit it. There are no tumors there, but just to be on the safe side, they took out 30% of her stomach.
Just to be safe.
Yeah.
No cancer, no tumors, but we're going to be safe and just taking this part of your stomach out
I tell
anyway.
you, true. That person is in jeopardy now because I don't know if she'll ever be able to tolerate the Two Feathers formula now.
Uh-huh.
I don't, and she can't be on it right now. It's going to be at least a month, and that was what's keeping her alive. So those are the sad things. You know, I love her. I'm shocked. Why did she go back to the oncologist when she was doing so well? It's because she just couldn't believe that this was working for her. She just trusted Dr. God that much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Do you find when you have put this book out there that there have been repercussions as a result of this?
Oh, I'm a little worried about that, Daniel. I do my prayers every day to Archangel Michael to protect me because I've seen too many people. I mean, if you're Suzanne Summers, I think you're okay. But if you're me, then I have to rely on prayer, and I do. But I just pray that I'll be wise, and I won't, prescribe. I'll be aware of the dangers, and I'll know that there's these sneaky guys out there, that pretend to be someone in need, hoping that I'll say something that could put me in jail. Now,
right.
How evil is that anyway?
Mm-hmm. I was going to bring up, there's a maverick out there that's big time. I actually came across this documentary. It was called The Doctor Who Cures Cancer. And if you go on YouTube, he's very easy to find all over the place, actually.
Good.
A guy by the name of Dr. Brzezinski. And he's a fascinating individual out of Texas that has literally stood up to the pharmaceutical industry. And more and more people are really getting behind this guy. This guy has been, the best way to put it, a real badass in this fight. This is a real fight against cancer.
I'm grateful.
And so check that out because he may be someone, and I don't know, that you can click into. But here's another thing. Dr. Mehmet Oz, I mean, everybody knows who this guy is. He interviews this guy, which I haven't seen this yet, but I would be kind of interested. But, the thing is I watched this and I realized, boy, how this guy was able to stand up to this and how what seems to be happening is the law, and believe it or not, people may not believe the law and that there is a justice system, but in America, I've seen it work in some of the most extreme circumstances where you leave you scratching your head like, wow, there is justice in America. And this is one of those guys that it seems to be slowly turning around where they're going, maybe it's time the rest of you shut up and we listen to what this guy is showing because he's showing some solid results. And I think one of the hardest things is that, and you can look this up on YouTube as well, is there's a testimony by a Sergeant Shift, whose daughter died eventually as a result of doing the standard protocol of cancer treatment, even though he went to Dr. Brzezinski and turned everything around. But because of the devastation of the chemo and the radiation, it literally, to a degree, and this is just my quote, not his, left her brain pretty much almost brain dead. And then eventually she died, But the fact is that she had went cancer-free for a lengthy period of time, but it was the destruction from the other protocol that caused her death in the long run.
Well, this is the truth. What you're saying is absolute truth. I'm glad that you brought it up. I have many, many cases of similar situations. And by the way, if I have another few minutes, I would like to tell your listeners something that I think is very, very important, because in February 17th of this year, Belgium passed a legislation making it legal to euthanize children of all ages who are suffering from terminal diseases such as cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is heart-wrenching. Not only is it heart-wrenching, but it's so unnecessary. And by the way, what consequences are there for people who would do that anyway to their own children? Uh-huh. And I'm talking about people as a whole, all of us. All of us.
Yeah.
And then I had this one lady, and she had done the chemo, she had done the surgery, she had done the radiation, she was dutiful. And when there was nothing more that the doctors could do to her, they sent her home to die, and then I heard about her. So I said to her friend, well, let's get her on the two feathers. And they said, oh, no, it's too late. The doctor said that it's Christmas time, that she can go home and be with her family over Christmas. And then after Christmas, she will come back to the doctor's, and he will give her the peaceful pill, better known as the suicide pill, in one of the states, Washington State, where it was legal. And she chose to do that, not even trying, not even taking an opportunity to try, because the doctor had so convinced her there was no help.
Well, and there you go. We feel that in this case of this particular doctor, is that he feels that he's doing the right thing. He feels this. He believes this.
He does believe this.
And the fact is it goes contrary to what we were just talking about earlier, commitment. And if your doctor's not committed that the outcome is going to be very good, what chance do you really have?
Well, they do believe in their own medicine. That's true. But what's shocking is, why aren't they interested, as you said, in something different that is working? Why do they feel so threatened by that? Oncology wouldn't be necessary if people with cancer were using the two feathers formula or Dr. Brzezinski's formula or whatever. There are several other people out there. I know there are. Tullio Simoncini does his work. But this is the one that God gave to me. So why are the doctors going, wow, what is that? You're well? Oh, that's wonderful. Where is that? What is that? Well, I don't understand. I think that's the grief of it all. But here's my bottom line. I'm not looking at, they don't have to agree. They don't have to awaken. I'm not going to them.
Well, there you go. Spend time again making the commitment to yourself. And that commitment goes in doing your homework, do your homework.
Yeah.
I just remember Harvey McKay in Swimming with the Sharks said what he always says, just do your homework. And it's not that hard to do. And if, a doctor kind of makes you feel uneasy when you go and say, what do you think about this? Go in another direction and find out maybe not somebody who supports it, but get you to start looking at it to ask even different questions, but then you also have to take action as well. So is there a website, Susan, people can find out more?
Thank you so much, Daniel. Yes, my website is www. And that's the name of my book, H-A, I Laugh in the Face of Cancer.com.
Very good, Susan. It's been a pleasure to have you here on the program. I know in the back of the book you give a lot of interesting essential oils and things that people can use, not only to promote better health, but also to prevent bad health as well. And I'll encourage people to get a copy of this book. Where can they find that? Is it just on your website?
It is on my website. It's also available on Amazon.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. And the most important thing is for the listeners to understand out there about this book, Susan, it's not a big read. You'll probably be able to finish it over lunch, which gives you plenty of time to do the homework we've been talking about. But the fact is that you see passion. You certainly can hear it in your voice that, look, it's very possible, people, to turn this around. So don't just surrender your power somewhere else because, just when you see that scenario, you realize somebody's literally seemingly just giving up, because they don't know there's another way.
There is. Thank you, Daniel. You're just so delightful. I love talking with you, and I'm so grateful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's passionate for me to bring these things on the program because by midlife, people start to realize, I've been doing everything the way I thought I was told I was supposed to be doing it, and I'm very frustrated with that. And this is kind of one of those, things that I think is very important for people to see that, well, traditionally, this is probably the way it's always been done, but at a 1 to 2% success rate, as I understand it, because we brought on a scientist that talked about this very thing. And to realize, would you go to Las Vegas with a 1 to 2% chance of winning? No, I don't think so.
Well, I agree with you. And then we also have to consider the burden that there is financially on our country, on our world, and we're killing our children, and we're giving people suicide pills. So something here is not only wrong, but something here is evil.
That's interesting that you said that. I'd be interested in an email from you about this legislation you were saying being passed for that very thing. That, to me, is pretty alarming. I've never heard of that before, but that's strange.
Like I said, God gives me these things. I turn on the TV and I see it. I write it down. On February 17th, 2014, Belgium passed legislature.
Wow. Fascinating. The book is I Laugh in the Face of Cancer. My guest today is Susan Liberty Hall, and she's certainly creating liberty for those of you around there to find ways that you can actually begin to get your personal power back, regardless of what it is. Susan, what a pleasure to have you on the program today.
Thank you, and I'm so grateful. Happy Mother's Day to all your listeners.
You betcha. We also want to extend a special Mother's Day to everybody else who's out there listening. Thank you for tuning in, your questions, suggestions, and everything that you need here. I'm Daniel Davis, encouraging you to visit us at our website, which is beyond50radio.com. We do have our exclusive weekly update we encourage you to subscribe to as well. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.